They said dogs forget, but not Valor. It had been 12 days. 12 long days since Valor was brought to the VA hospital. And every single day, he sat outside room 217, paws pressed to the floor, eyes fixed on the door that never opened for him. Inside that room lay Sergeant Thomas Grady, the man he'd saved. The man who now didn't even remember his name. "Come on, buddy," a young nurse said, trying for the third time to coax Valor away. "You can't stay here all day." Valor didn't blink. He didn't move. His tail didn't wag. He just stared at the door, waiting. Another nurse walked by, carrying a tray. She sighed. "He doesn't even remember you, dog. He's too far gone." Valor's ears twitched. Maybe he couldn't understand their words, but his heart knew what they meant. The hallway smelled of bleach and silence. Doctors passed. Visitors passed. But Valor never flinched. His world had shrunk to a single room, a single door. And the man on the other side. Behind that door, Sergeant Grady sat on the edge of his bed staring at nothing. His hands trembled sometimes. He mumbled names no one recognized. The explosion had taken parts of him no scan could see. "I don't know why I'm even here," Thomas said to Dr. Monroe during one of their sessions. "They say I was a hero. I don't feel like one." Dr. Monroe spoke gently. "You don't have to remember to heal." Outside, Valor shifted. He stood for a moment, padded closer to the door, and whined softly. A quiet, aching sound. That night, the janitor tried again. "Come on, dog. Time to move." But Valor lowered his body to the cold floor and laid his head on his paws. He wasn't going anywhere. In the early hours of the morning, a security guard watching the cameras leaned closer to his screen. "Hey," he called out. "This dog. He's not just waiting, he's guarding." And he was. He was guarding more than a door. He was guarding a memory, a bond, a mission. Because Valor didn't forget. He remembered the sound of Thomas's voice, the feel of his hand, the command that meant stay, the one he never disobeyed. And now, even if Thomas didn't remember him, even if his name was lost somewhere in the dark, Valor would wait, because some orders don't need repeating, and some dogs don't need permission to love. The boots were old, worn down, dust-stained, and heavy with stories Thomas couldn't remember. He didn't notice them at first. Just stepped over them that morning like they didn't matter. But they hadn't been there yesterday, and no one said a word. Inside room 217, Thomas sat on the narrow hospital bed, his eyes locked on a wall with no pictures. Nothing looked familiar, not the bed, not the clothes, not even the man staring back from the mirror. "I'm tired," he muttered. Dr. Monroe sat across from him. "Tired from what, Sergeant?" "I don't know," he said quietly. "Existing, maybe." She nodded, writing something down. Outside, just beyond the closed door, Valor lay curled up, ears twitching at every sound from inside. The boots had been his idea. He'd slipped into the supply closet the night before. No one knew how, but the cameras caught it all. How he found the box with Thomas's name, pulled out the boots, and carried them one by one to the door. That night, the janitor watched. From a distance, "Crazy dog," he whispered. "What are you trying to say?" But Valor didn't move. He sat by the boots, eyes on the door. Back inside, Thomas rubbed his temples. Memories came like shadows. Too fast, too vague. A voice yelling. Sand in his mouth. A flash of light. Then nothing. "I don't feel like a soldier," he said suddenly. "They keep calling me Sergeant, but I don't feel like anything." Dr. Monroe leaned forward. "Do you remember anything at all?" Thomas hesitated. "There's a sound, a low bark, then a weight against my boot, but I can't see it." She paused, then asked gently, "Do you want to see something?" He nodded. She stood, walked to the door and opened it. Valor didn't move, just looked up. "Is this him?" she asked softly. Thomas stared. "That's the dog who won't leave?" "He was assigned to you," she said. 14 months. Afghanistan. Thomas stood slowly, walked to the door, and looked down at the boots. They weren't here yesterday. No, Dr. Monroe replied. He brought them. Valor looked up, eyes steady, tail still. No wag, no bark, just waiting. Thomas bent down and touched the boots. I don't remember, he whispered. Valor whined quietly, his eyes never leaving Thomas's face. Thomas stepped back. Tell him to leave, he said. Dr. Monroe hesitated. He's not hurting anyone. I said, tell him to go. Thomas snapped. Valor didn't flinch, but he didn't move either. Thomas closed the door. Inside the room, silence returned, but the boots stayed, and so did Valor. Because some dogs don't need orders to stay on duty, they just know when they're still needed. Thomas didn't touch the boots again. He shoved them under the bed. But that night, he didn't sleep. He kept hearing a soft whine outside the door. Not loud. Just enough to remind him someone was there. Waiting. By morning, something strange started happening. Valor wasn't just sitting at the door anymore. He started moving with purpose, appearing in hallways when Thomas went to therapy. Sitting, quietly in corners during lunch. Never close enough to provoke, but always there. He's tracking him, one nurse whispered. Another nodded. It's like he's watching for something. Staff didn't know what to do. He wasn't aggressive, just focused, alert, waiting. By the third day, Dr. Monroe called a meeting. He's not just waiting, she said. He's trying to trigger something. One of the techs leaned back in his chair. Or maybe he's just loyal. Back in room 217, Thomas sat by the window holding his head. I feel like I'm losing it, he muttered. That dog, he's everywhere. Dr. Monroe kept her tone calm. He's not hurting anyone. He's hurting me, Thomas snapped. I don't know him. I don't want to know him. That evening, Thomas opened his door to a small thud. On the floor lay a thin silver chain, dog tags, not his hospital ID, real military dog tags, scuffed, familiar. He stared at them for a long time. Then he turned and yelled, Who put these here? A nurse passing by jumped. What tags? These, he barked, holding them up. They weren't here before. She looked confused. I didn't see anything, Sergeant. Thomas stepped into the hallway. Valor sat 10 feet away, still, watching Thomas's fists clenched. I don't know that dog, he shouted. Do you hear me? I don't know him. Valor didn't move. Dr. Monroe rushed over, speaking softly. Thomas, it's okay. Let's go back inside. He shook his head. He keeps bringing me things, first the boots, now the tags. Why? What does he want? Dr. Monroe looked at Valor. Maybe he wants you to remember. I can't, Thomas yelled. Every time I try, it's just noise and fire. He dropped the tags. They hit the floor with a soft clink. Valor didn't flinch. He simply stood, walked forward, and gently nudged the tags with his nose. Then he backed away and sat down again. Thomas stared. No, he whispered. Stop trying to fix me. I'm not broken. I'm gone. He slammed the door. Inside, his chest heaved with shallow breaths. The tags lay outside, and Valor stayed beside them. Still, silent, watching. Because some memories come with pain, and some dogs wait anyway. The tags were still on the floor when Thomas left for group therapy. He didn't pick them up. Didn't even look at Valor, who sat across the hall still guarding the door. Watching, Dr. Monroe met Thomas at the hallway. You okay? He shrugged. It's just another room with more people I don't know. She didn't push. The group was small, 5 veterans, all broken in different ways. A young guy named Danny talked about losing his best friend in the field. I saw it happen, Danny said. 1 second he was there, next second gone. Thomas blinked hard. Danny kept talking. I still hear his voice sometimes, like he's calling my name. Thomas's hands clenched. Then, his breathing changed. He stood up suddenly. Sniper, he whispered. Sniper! Everyone down! Before anyone could react, he lunged. He tackled Danny hard, dragging him behind a chair. Get down! He's on the ridge! Chaos exploded in the room. Another vet yelled, What's happening? Thomas pulled Danny tighter. Shut up or you'll get us both killed. Orderlies burst through the door. But Valor was faster. He charged down the hall, dodging staff, and threw himself through the open doorway. He didn't growl. He didn't bark. He slid in front of Thomas and locked eyes with him. Not a sound. Just that stare. Frozen. Thomas's breath caught. His hands let go of Danny. He blinked. Where am I? He muttered. What's happening? One of the nurses helped. Danny up. Dr. Monroe knelt beside Thomas. You're okay, you're safe. Thomas looked down. Valor was still staring, unmoving. What is he doing? He asked, voice shaking. He's grounding you, she said softly. He knew you were slipping. Thomas's eyes filled. I thought I was back there. I saw the ridge, I heard the fire. He looked at Valor again. You stopped me, he whispered. Valor didn't blink. He stood up suddenly. Sniper, he whispered. Sniper. Everyone down. Before anyone could react, he lunged. He tackled Danny hard, dragging him behind a chair. Get down. He's on the ridge. Chaos exploded in the room. Another vet yelled, What's happening? Thomas pulled Danny tighter. Shut up or you'll get us both killed. Orderlies burst through the door. But Valor was faster. He charged down the hall, dodging staff, and threw himself through the open doorway. He didn't growl. He didn't bark. He slid in front of Thomas and locked eyes with him. Not a sound. Just that stare. Frozen. Thomas's breath caught. His hands let go of Danny. He blinked. Where am I? He muttered. What's happening? One of the nurses helped. Danny up. Dr. Monroe knelt beside Thomas. You're okay, you're safe. Thomas looked down. Valor was still staring, unmoving. What is he doing? He asked, voice shaking. He's grounding you, she said softly. He knew you were slipping. Thomas's eyes filled. I thought I was back there. I saw the ridge. I heard the fire. He looked at Valor again. You stopped me, he whispered. Valor didn't blink. Thomas reached out slowly, his hand hovering in the air. But before he touched the dog, he froze again. Then he pulled back. No, he said. I can't do this. He stood and backed into the wall. This is a trick. Using that dog to control me. Dr. Monroe shook her head. No tricks, just memory. And maybe something deeper. Thomas looked away. I'm not ready. He walked out of the room. Fast, shaky. Valor started to follow, but stopped at Dr. Monroe's signal. That night Thomas didn't speak to anyone. He didn't sleep. But he opened his door. Just enough. And the dog tags? He placed them gently on the nightstand, because something had broken. But not everything had shattered. Something, small, had started to heal. The next morning, Thomas didn't say much. But he didn't close the door, either. Valor stayed close, quiet, watching. Then the hospital made a decision. 2 more days, the director told Dr. Monroe. If there's no change, the dog goes back to base. Dr. Monroe argued. He's making progress. But the answer was firm. 48 hours. That evening, Thomas sat alone in the garden, his hands buried deep in his pockets. He hated the quiet. It made the memories creep back in pieces. Voices, heat, a scream. He closed his eyes. And that's when it hit him. A wave of noise. Fire. Sand in his mouth. He dropped to his knees. His breathing got loud. Shaky. No. Not again. Inside, Valor shot up. He bolted through the hallway before anyone could stop him, pushing the door open with his nose. Thomas was curled on the ground, shaking. Valor didn't bark. He didn't whine. He walked forward and did something so simple. He lay down at Thomas's feet, then slowly he placed his head on the toe of Thomas's boot, just like he used to, and Thomas froze. He didn't understand it at first, but that feeling, that exact pressure on his boot, it wasn't new. It was old. Very old. Wait position, he whispered. His voice cracked. Valor didn't move. Ears up, still as stone. Hold position, Thomas said again, louder this time, and just like that. Something clicked. Thomas blinked fast, gripping the edge of the bench. You used to do that. His hand hovered over Valor's head, then slowly lowered. I know this. I know you. Dr. Monroe had been watching from the doorway. She didn't speak, just nodded to a nurse to hold everyone back. Thomas started shaking again, but not from fear, from recognition. You were mine, he whispered. Afghanistan, you were my partner. Valor let out a soft exhale like a long-held breath had finally been released. I gave you that command, Thomas said, eyes wide. You waited like this every time, even under fire. His hand moved, to Valor's head gently pressing down. I remember. His voice broke. I remember you. And for the first time since he'd arrived at the hospital, Thomas didn't feel alone. The moment Thomas touched Valor's head, everything changed. It wasn't just the familiar weight of the dog's fur, the warm pressure on his boot. It was something deeper, something buried under all the pain and confusion. For the first time since his injury, Thomas felt the sensation of something real. Valor's fur was thick, but his skull was solid beneath the touch, the same as it had been in Afghanistan. Thomas didn't even realize he was speaking until the words spilled out. You never passed separation tests, he murmured, because you wouldn't leave my side. Valor's ears perked up, and his eyes stayed locked on Thomas's face, steady as ever. Thomas's breath shook. Memories came flooding back, quick flashes like images on a broken screen piecing themselves together. North Carolina, the military base, hot sun and endless training. Valor was just a pup then, still, learning the ropes, still fighting the urge to follow Thomas everywhere. I didn't want you near me then, Thomas whispered. You kept sticking to me, like glue. But Valor had never left his side, not even when they were separated for drills. Valor failed the test because he refused to stay apart from Thomas for more than a few minutes. And Thomas had hated him, for it at first thinking it was a weakness. I thought you didn't understand orders, Thomas murmured, his voice breaking slightly. But now, I get it. You were right. He remembered the desert next, the dry heat, the sand sticking to everything, even his skin. They had walked together for hours side by side. Valor always knew when something was wrong, before anyone else. He'd sniff the air, tense up, and guide them away from danger. Explosives, Thomas whispered. You could always smell it before anyone else. But the most vivid memory that came back, the one that shook him to his core, was the scar. Thomas closed his eyes tightly. A near-miss sniper shot. Valor had jumped in front, of him taking the brunt of the blast meant for Thomas. He'd barked once in warning and then the crack of a bullet. Valor hadn't moved when the bullet grazed his ear, the fur ripping as blood seeped through. He didn't even yelp. You saved me, Thomas said, voice choked. You saved me, and I never even knew why. Valor's soft whine brought him back to the moment. The dog was still at his feet, still watching him, waiting. Thomas's hand trembled as he gripped the fur behind Valor's ear. The scar was still there, faint but real. He traced the edge of it with his fingertips. I remember you, Thomas said, his voice breaking through the silence. You always knew. You always knew. Valor's tail gave a small, slow wag. He didn't need to bark, didn't need to do anything but be there. And for the first time in months, Thomas felt like he was finally coming back to himself. Slowly, his heart started to heal. Slowly, the soldier who had been lost in his own memories found his way back, all because of a dog who never gave up. The memories came fast, too fast, each one jagged like a puzzle with pieces that didn't quite fit. Some were good, moments of laughter, quiet nights in the barracks, Valor lying at his feet. But the rest? The darker ones hit harder. One mission stood out, clear as day. He could still feel the tension in the air. The dust, the heat, the smell of gunpowder. We were in Kunar province, Thomas murmured, eyes unfocused as if the past was unfolding in front of him. Valor was always there, always watching. Valor sat beside him, ears up, eyes alert. The way he looked at Thomas made him feel safe, like nothing could hurt them as long as they were together. We were clearing the buildings, Thomas continued. I was focused on the mission. We were close to the target. His voice cracked as the memory hit. He warned me. He tried to stop me. Thomas felt the pain flood back, the hesitation in Valor's movements. The dog had been tense, darting his head from one side to the other, sniffing the air. The look in his eyes was unmistakable. Danger. Valor was alert, and Thomas knew it, but he didn't listen. I thought he was just nervous, Thomas said, his voice barely a whisper now. I thought we had to keep moving. We couldn't waste time. Valor had been trained to detect explosives. The way he acted, it was clear he sensed something. But Thomas, focused on the mission, ignored the dog's warning. He kept moving forward, told Valor to heel, ordered him to follow. Go, Valor, Thomas had commanded. We move now. Valor obeyed, like he always did. He didn't hesitate. He never disobeyed an order. But this time, the order was wrong. He knew. Thomas choked out, wiping his eyes. He knew there was something there. The IED went off just a few steps later. The explosion threw Thomas to the ground. He heard Valor bark once, a sharp cry that cut through the chaos. And then the world went black. I should have listened, Thomas whispered, clutching Valor's fur tightly. I should have listened to you. Valor was the first thing Thomas saw when he woke up, bleeding but alive. The shrapnel had missed him just barely. He'd been close enough to take the brunt of it, but Valor never left his side. He was right there, guarding him as always. I almost lost you that day, Thomas whispered, voice thick with emotion. Valor nuzzled his hand, soft but insistent. No words needed, just the quiet, unwavering presence of the dog who had saved his life. I didn't listen, Thomas said, his voice trembling. And you never stopped. Valor's head rested gently on Thomas's knee, just like it always did, a reminder that despite the mistakes, the pain, and the regret, Valor was still there, still protecting him, still after everything. Thomas wiped his face and smiled through the tears. I should have listened to you, he whispered again. I should have listened. The sound came out of nowhere. A sharp, deafening crack. A delivery truck backfired, outside the hospital, but to Thomas it wasn't just a truck. It was a gunshot, a sniper, an ambush. His body reacted before his mind could catch up. Without thinking, Thomas dropped to the floor, going into full combat mode. His breath came fast. His muscles tensed and his mind raced. He couldn't breathe, couldn't see. All he could hear was the rush of adrenaline and the pounding of his heart. Get down, he screamed to the empty room. Get down, sniper. He scrambled to cover, his hands shaking as he searched for the threat. But there was no sniper. There was no gunfire. Thomas, Dr. Monroe shouted, rushing toward him. It's okay, it's okay. Her voice barely reached him. The walls closed in, and he was back there, back in that village in Afghanistan, surrounded by the chaos, the explosions, the gunfire, the fear. And then he saw it. Valor. Valor had been there, had been right there beside him when the blast went off. Valor, Thomas whispered, his voice breaking. You tried to pull me back. You knew. He remembered it clearly now. The yow, Way Valor had acted, pulling at his vest, refusing to let him go forward. Valor had known the danger. He had tried to stop him, to save him. But Thomas hadn't listened. "You saved me," Thomas whispered, trembling. "And I didn't listen. I didn't see it." He saw the blast in his mind, the explosion that shook the earth, throwing them both to the ground. Valor had jumped in front of him, taking the full force of the blast, and Thomas had barely escaped with his life. But Valor had been there, bloodied, bruised, still guarding him, still watching over him. In the therapy room, Thomas sat down hard, his body heavy with grief. He buried his face in his hands. "He saved me," he sobbed, "and I forgot him." Dr. Monroe knelt beside him, her voice gentle but firm. "You didn't forget him, Thomas. You survived, and so did he." Thomas's tears flowed freely now. "But I wasn't there for him. I didn't do enough." Dr. Monroe placed a hand on his shoulder. "Valor is here, Thomas. He's right here, and he's not leaving. You don't have to be alone anymore." Thomas lifted his head, his eyes red and raw. He looked at Valor, who was sitting quietly at his feet, watching him with those steady, knowing eyes. Thomas reached out and stroked Valor's head. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'm so sorry." And in that moment, it wasn't just the past that was healed. It was the bond that had never broken. Thomas had started to improve. It wasn't fast. He still had bad days, dark days. But it was progress. And that's all he could ask for. The fog in his mind had started to lift. The memories that had once haunted him now came in pieces, and with them came a sense of clarity he hadn't felt in months. But it wasn't just Thomas who was changing. Valor had been by his side through it all. But lately the dog had started, doing something new. During group therapy, Valor would sit near the other veterans, watching them with the same focus he'd given Thomas. When a vet would start to slip into a bad memory, Valor would quietly approach, sitting next to them, placing his head on their knee or leaning gently against their side. It was as if Valor was spreading the healing he'd given Thomas to others. One day, Dr. Monroe asked, "What happens now, Thomas?" Thomas glanced at Valor. The dog was resting on the floor beside him, still and calm, his eyes fixed on him with that knowing gaze. "He has another mission," Thomas said, his voice soft, almost a whisper. "Not with me. With them." Dr. Monroe was quiet for a moment, considering his words. Then she nodded slowly. "You mean you're ready to let him go?" Thomas didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached down and gently ran his hand through Valor's fur. The touch was a mix of tenderness and sorrow, but it also held something else, something he couldn't quite name. Valor leaned into the touch, as if understanding. "I can't keep him," Thomas said, his voice cracking. "He's done more for me than I can ever repay, but there are other people out there, people like I was, lost, stuck in the dark." Valor turned his head toward Thomas, his eyes steady, as if listening. Thomas swallowed hard, fighting the lump in his throat. "You found me in the dark?" he whispered, his voice barely audible. "Now, help them find their way too." Valor's tail gave a slow, deliberate wag, and for the first time in a long time, Thomas smiled. It wasn't a full smile, not yet, but it was a start. "I know you'll help them," Thomas said, his hand shaking as he placed it on Valor's head one last time. "You've always known how to find people when they're lost. I don't need to be the only one you save." Valor stood up, as if accepting his new mission. He walked over to Thomas, nuzzling his hand one last time. Thomas stood up and took a step back. "Go, boy. Go find them. They need you." Valor turned, looking back at him for just a moment. Their eyes met, and in that look everything was said. There was no need for more words. As Valor walked away, Thomas felt a piece of his heart follow him, but he knew it was right. Valor had always been more than just a dog. He had been a lifeline, and now he was ready to be someone else's, and with that, Valor took his first step toward the next mission, his final one. It was the morning of Thomas's discharge. He stood by the door, his duffel bag slung over his shoulder. The air in the hospital room felt heavy. Valor sat beside him, still as ever, his eyes fixed on Thomas with that unwavering intensity. It was as if he knew something Thomas didn't yet understand. Thomas paused, taking a deep breath. The world felt different now, clearer yet somehow still fractured. He was healing, but there was more to the journey. And Valor had been the one constant in that struggle, the one who never left, never gave up, even when Thomas had pushed him away. "Ready, boy?" Thomas asked softly, as if Valor could answer. Valor's tail wagged slowly, just enough to show he was aware, but there was no joy in Thomas's heart today, just the heavy weight of what was coming. He wasn't leaving Valor behind because he wanted to. He was doing it because it was what Valor deserved. He turned to Dr. Monroe, who had been standing quietly by the door, watching. "He's ready. He's more than ready," Thomas said, his voice thick. "But I can't keep him." Dr. Monroe nodded, a sad smile on her face. "You're doing the right thing, Thomas. You've healed. And now, Valor gets to heal others." Thomas couldn't speak. He only nodded, the tears welling up in his eyes. He walked to Valor and knelt down beside him. "You've been my lifeline, boy," Thomas whispered, stroking his fur. "But there are others out there who need you. They need you more than I do now." Valor's ears twitched at his voice, but he didn't move. He didn't need to. He understood. With shaking hands, Thomas reached down and scratched behind Valor's ears, the way he knew the dog liked it. The memories of their time together rushed back like a flood, and he had to choke down a sob. Valor had been the one to save him, the one who had never once let him down. "Go help them, boy. Help them find their way," Thomas said, his voice breaking. "I know you will." Valor stood slowly, as if acknowledging the change. He gave Thomas one last look, look that said everything Thomas needed to hear. He wasn't leaving because he wanted to. He was leaving because his work wasn't finished. He still had a mission to complete. Dr. Monroe opened the door, and Valor moved toward it. He paused, looked back at Thomas one more time, and then walked out into the hallway. Thomas stayed behind, watching him go. And as Valor disappeared from sight, he finally let the tears fall. But this wasn't goodbye. Not really. Valor would be helping soldiers like Thomas, soldiers who had been lost in their own darkness, their own trauma. Valor had always known how to find them, just as he had found Thomas in his darkest hours. And now, every time Valor laid his head on someone's boot, every time he sat by their side, he would remind them of the strength they had inside them, waiting to be uncovered. Thomas watched through the window as Valor entered a new room, another veteran, another soul in need of saving. And as Valor placed his head gently on the boot of a man sitting on the floor, something powerful happened. The man looked down at the dog, his eyes wide with recognition. "I remember you," the man whispered. "I remember." Thomas wiped his eyes and whispered to himself, "You never gave up, boy." And Valor's mission continued, one life at a time.